So I think I'll go ahead and get started, but appreciate everyone for hopping on. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Victoria Kallsen. I'm the founder of a company called Build Bedrock, where we all offer sales consulting services for early stage startups. I've been working as a sales engineer in technical sales since 2018. I actually wanted to start off by sharing a little bit about my first customer call and what that was like back then. On my third or fourth day at Seagrid, joined a call with this company called Amcor that I don't even really remember what they did anymore. But they were really excited about the product, and I walked away feeling like, wow, we just really won that deal. We nailed it in one call. Amazing. What I've learned in the last 6 years is it's really not that simple. That deal never went through. That call never went through. But I think one of the great things about being an engineer and working in sales now is the way that you can really apply the way you understand technology and product to a customer's experience. And in my last 6 years, I've learned a lot about sales, but I've also learned a lot about connecting with people and customers. And so I'm really excited to share that with you guys today. I know that we're all used to Zoom windows and the impersonal nature of an online conversation like this. So definitely encourage you guys, to unmute yourself, ask questions, throw things in the chat. Really excited to hear about what you guys are working on and not just, have me monologue for 30 minutes. I do probably have, about 30 minutes worth of slides, but, really interested in what you guys mostly want to learn today and not just what I want to teach. So please feel free to ask any particular questions along the way. In terms of, what is the problem I hear when I work with founders today and when we're talking about things like running sales calls. So, if you've gotten to the point where you've actually gotten a customer on the line, you're so excited for that deal to go through, but maybe they're not responding after their call with you. You had that first initial call, but there's no follow-up. There's no going from that point. You might find that people are really bored when you're going through your pitch deck. Somehow, all of that hard work you've put into those slides isn't paying off. And you're not really getting people to understand the product you're trying to sell. Maybe it's as simple as you don't know what to ask the customer or how to run the call itself. Running sales calls is not something I learned in my engineering degree. It's not something that's really foundational in a lot of startup knowledge either. And there is a big difference between a customer discovery or informational interview and a sales call itself. One more person just joined. Let me let them in. Hi, Molly. Thanks for joining. And then, you could be having a lot of calls, but not a lot of people are signing up. So that's another challenge that I hear from the founders that I speak with. Any other particular problems, people want to share, anything they're encountering when they're working with customers today or trying to get their first customers for their startups?
I know one thing I've seen is people not knowing where to search or how to find customers, basically the beginning process of who to reach out to and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that, and we'll talk about this too as we go through like some of my slides, but attracting those customers in the first place can often be a big challenge for startup founders, or who to reach out to and why.
If I can add, I also say that the potential customer client not even seeing your venture or your service as a problem to even register for themselves. Oftentimes you're dealing with at least around the circle that I'm with, it seems that a lot of people are on the bleeding edge of something, and not necessarily knowing how to also include or make it a matter for other people who may not know like their venture is something to account for. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I think one of the really great things about founding your own company is you have such a clear dream and vision for like the problem that you want to solve. And often in a startup, you're doing a lot of education of this is why this might be a problem. This is why, we want you to consider this service. And I think, one of the things we'll cover is just how you can connect the problems your customer is aware of to the problem you're trying to solve, because that's really crucial in this type of conversation. But thanks for chiming in. So I wanted to be definitely really clear with you guys on what I'm going to cover today. Let me advance the slide there. Cool. So, these are the 3 takeaways I thought of before, I put this training together of what do I want people to walk away from after, speaking with me today. So my first thing is really what we'll cover, which is called customer empathy. And, coming from the tech background that I have, it's certainly a skill that has really served me well, both in explaining technology and working with customers, of really being able to empathize with their situation. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, how that can really transform the way you might approach a sales conversation. I also have a couple different discovery questions for anyone who is familiar with elements of the sales process. We'll dive deeper into discovery, but often it can be a challenge of what do I even think to ask my customer on these calls, because I'm trying to get so much information and I need to start organizing what are the questions I really need to ask early on versus, later down the line, let's say. And then finally, like all good engineers, I love some alliterative processes. And so you'll see a couple today, one of them being the 4 Ds of discover, determine, demonstrate, and define. And those, I think, are 4 of the most critical elements to any sales process, any sales call. And being able to deploy those is what we'll cover as well today. Great. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else got the really stale business advice to read, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. But it's something that I sometimes think back on, as much as that book kind of didn't ring fully true for me. But a lot of what did was just people are inherently most interested in themselves. When you're getting on a call with a customer, they have, the rest of their day. They have their boss complaining about them for XYZ. They have groceries they need to pick up later. They're a whole person with their own lives, their own things that are going on. And when we think about our customers as people and the experiences they each have individually, we can really start thinking about the types of problems they have, the goals they have, the needs, the wants. To me, at times, in my experience when I've worked at companies in the robotic space, I've worked a lot in warehouse and logistics robotics. And in that experience that I've had, we're working with a lot of people who are working on warehouse floors. And there can be a sense of, do we actually think that end user is smart? Do we actually think they're capable of using with the robot? And we can kind of build up biases against like what that person is capable of in interacting with the robot. For me, if I don't know that that warehouse worker on the operating floor is working till 2 a.m., is kind of tired, they have this problem where this particular pallet, this particular product gets lost every single day. If I can't understand like the real things that bother them, I can't connect the work I'm doing and the problems I want to solve to that individual person. So when I think about customer empathy, a lot of people are actually really best at selling to a version of themselves. You see a lot of great tech products on the market because engineers are really great at selling to engineers, right? And being able to figure out how do you sell to someone who's a little bit different from you, how to connect your values to that person's values is what I found most transformational, honestly, in my sales journey. Again, going back to some of my experience in robotics, I was working with a lot of, industrial engineers who all love process and efficiency. That made it really easy for me. But my big customer for the majority of my time at a company was USPS. And I got really kind of obsessed with mail. I found it really interesting the way that it traveled across the world. And that interest that I grew and developed as part of working with that customer really served me well in being able to understand their needs and have like a baseline understanding of the problems they were facing as an organization. So I know the term ICP, ideal client profile, gets bandied out a lot, in startup places, sales and marketing. I'm curious if anyone, could share their ICP and maybe, some of the things they do know about it, or what else they might want to learn about that ICP.
I had something to share, Victoria. So I think my struggle right now is to really figure out who my ICP is because it's a new startup. So we have like difficulty in identifying like who would find most value out of the product. So honestly, I'm trying to figure out who the ICP in my case is. I have few bets, like few assumptions based on the product and the value of the product. So really trying to figure out like who is the most ideal customer is my pain point right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just knowing a little bit more about the company you're thinking about, but I think there is kind of two sides of this coin. There's both ICP of who do I actually care about working for and working with, and ICP of you know, who is the most commercially successful. And at the end of the day, you know, the founders, the people founding the company have a particular passion and a people they want to help. And that can expand maybe to different industries, but it's still maybe going to be a similar person. It's still going to be someone who they can really connect with on some level. So I think you can certainly be surveying like what is the most commercially best ICP, what's the industry that most needs this. You can do a lot of great, you know, net discovery, customer discovery on that. But I always think it's important that at the end of the day, founders are spending, I don't know, 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, sometimes working on their startups. And if you don't actually connect to the customer you're working with or on any respect, it's going to be really hard to stay motivated. That's kind of like my spiel on that.
So are there like any tools that you're aware of to sort of figure out like the ideal ICP? Like once you have an ICP, you have CRMs like HubSpot and Segment and, you know, to do all the contact management. You have Apollo, but how do you find like who's the most, is there any smart way to find an ICP based on the product and based on your offering?
Yeah, so I think generally you're going to start off with an idea, like this is or who you want. Like this is going to help people in the oil and gas industry because safety is important, and we know we're really good at safety with this robot. So that could be like where you start, and then as you're doing more discovery, as you're asking more questions, it's oh, you know, this is really actually helping people who do oil rig inspections. So I've gotten, you know, from oil and gas, which is a huge industry, to something a little more process specific, something a little more problem specific. Then we want to turn that into job titles. Then we want to turn that into how long has that person been in that industry. We want to think about, you know, through online research or looking at companies. There's tons of information about Shell, about BP, things that they're talking about in their industry that really bother them, that make it hard for them to do their day-to-day job. And then there's also people at lower levels you can speak with in your customer discovery to really identify that pain point. I hesitate to say you're going to find it all on LinkedIn or you're going to find it all online, but you're going to have to start building those relationships with some of the industries you want to talk to. And say, hey, I'm really here to solve your problems. I've come up with this thing that solves this, and I think it's great. But I also do want to hear what you have to say about this particular industry and your problems in it, because I think most people really like complaining about their jobs, and you can get pretty far with that. Great. Any other questions people might have? Yeah, Max.
Yeah, I wanted to not on the ICP, but I really want to say that the takeaway here about people are best at selling to a version of themselves. I think that's such a good insight. I remember I was working with an HR tech startup and doing sales alongside the founder. This was Q1 of this year. And we were talking to an executive recruiter, and the gentleman gets on the call. It's a 25-minute demo. He's 5 minutes late. He gets on the call and he's blunt, direct. He's like, I got 15 minutes. I don't want any bullshit. Just tell me what you do and if it solves my problem. And the founder I was with, he was kind of taken aback. And I'm from Philly, so like bluntness, directness, and no bullshit's kind of my love language. So I was with the founder. I told him, I was like, let me get this, and was very clear and said, this is what we can do. This is no bullshit, and this is the price. And we had a customer after a 15-minute phone call. So sometimes it's really kind of reading the room of, how is the other person showing up? Is it someone that, wants just the facts, someone that wants to nerd out about the technology, or someone who really wants to be feel heard and understood around their problem, and how your solution is the perfect fit for that problem. So I really like that takeaway you shared on, selling to the best version of themselves, or even just a buyer looking for a salesperson that can kind of mirror that back.
Yeah. I don't actually think I had this point in my slides, so I'll make a note to add it for the next time I give this talk. But one of the things that can be most interesting in a sales call is sometimes you're bringing up different things for different people. And so when you do a sale with a client, you might be interacting with an executive, a founder, you might be interacting with a technical decision maker, you might be interacting with finance, legal. All of these people have different desires and needs going into that conversation, and what you convey to them is going to be different because they're doing different things for you. Honestly, that legal person does not want to see your product demo. They don't care, but they do need to know about terms and conditions and what you're doing with data, let's say. So the conversation you're having can change depending on who's in the room, which is a big part of the pre-call homework I'll talk about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna keep going, but please keep chiming in. All right. Sorry, I kind of have two different views. I have a presenter view and a other view, so I'm getting a little confused with my three monitors right now. Yeah, so we've talked about customer empathy. I'm going to move to the next slide here. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some sales myths, things that I often hear when I've interacted in sales and just want to, kind of cover here. The first one is this one. So even though you can close a deal in one call, it does happen. Your offer, your service, and your target client may not, be conducive to closing in one call. I often find that the amount of trust you have to build, so just how unknown you are as a startup, as well as how much money you're asking for, is kind of proportional to how much time you need to spend in the sales process. Often you can use your sales process in a startup to educate your customer on problems, to convey your solution and the fit for that problem. And that might take time. And so, setting an unrealistic expectation of I have to close every deal in one call isn't the nature of startup sales in my experience. I'd love it if it could always happen. And I think the thing I think about, kind of a hot take, is that sales is honestly a lot about luck, and everything you do in sales is luck management, just trying to make it so that when those conditions are right and you find the person who's willing to buy, you've done everything you can to ensure that you can close as quickly as possible. It could be one call. You can keep targeting that, but just to set an expectation that, frankly, if you're trying to sell to General Electric or Amazon, that could be 6 months to a year, and much harder for a startup who is still working on building that trust and credibility within that market. The other kind of thing I wanted to dispel is there really is no one size fits all way to sell. I've been at a couple different startups now. I have a couple of different thoughts around, SaaS versus robotics. A lot of my experience is B2B sales. I've also sold to government organizations. And I'll cover this, I mentioned this too at the end, but customers don't really care about how you want to do things, right? They care about how they want to do things. You're going to have a lot of learnings during this process, things that work and don't work for you. And being okay with that changing and evolving and learning from it is, I think, a big part of sales. And then finally, I don't know if people know the term total addressable market, but the amount of people who could buy your product. Sometimes a bad salesperson is going to consider the total addressable market to be everyone. And coming to terms with the fact that not everyone is a good fit for what you're offering can really help preempt any sort of worries around failure, I'd say, when you're selling in startups. Okay. Oh, skipped ahead. So I wanted to kind of convey one quick pivot here about how I see the relationship your customer has with your company. We're going to really focus on acquisition or acquiring customers today, but I also know that there's a ton of great questions around how you find customers or how customers find you. So I call this full stack commercialization because it's end to end, everything from the approach of who buys, what they buy, why they buy. A lot of that is going to be your great, ICP building, setting a marketing approach, but it might also be informed by engineering decisions. If you choose not to build a particular feature, like white labeling your solution, and you are trying to sell to an enterprise customer who really wants that, that is going to affect your ability to close a deal, right? So the approach can really affect how you're actually able to sell to a customer. I just briefly touched on attraction, but this is all the stuff a lot of startup founders want to know about. How do I find customers? How do customers find me? How do they learn about what I can offer them? The marketing and outbound pieces of that are really interesting and can really vary from startup to startup. I certainly can keep diving into that at a future point, but that's what I call attraction. So how is someone attracted to your company? Acquisition, the thing we're going to focus on today, is how that customer decides to buy from you. And then activation is that customer deciding, in a free trial, in a paid trial, or even their first few weeks, I'm really bought into what I was sold in that sales process. And then acceptance, we're all super happy. The customer loves it. We love it. We're having a great time. It's where we all want to be. This can seem like a really messy process, and it can be long in like a B2B startup cycle where you're really trying hard to, sell a robot, sell a piece of software that needs a lot of customization or configuration or specialization. But I do think the fun example that I think that I can walk you through here is something as simple as Duolingo, a mobile app that you can download on your phone. We're actually, doing the full cycle here maybe within a couple of days when it comes to downloading a mobile app. We know who Duolingo is targeting. They're targeting young people. They are going to buy a mobile app. Why do they want to buy? They want to learn a new language in a fun and engaging way and not expensively. Duolingo took an old need of education, wanting to travel, and put a new spin on it to compete with people like Rosetta Stone that really changed the game, right? Because Duolingo is direct to consumer, there's a lot of word of mouth, social media, referrals, brand identity. All of those types of attraction methods are really big when you're to a consumer. The acquisition is as simple as, you going into the mobile app store on your phone, Android, Apple, whatever, downloading it, product-led growth. That app has everything you need to decide you want to buy that solution. If you're a really established software service, it's possible, something like HubSpot, where you can sign up for free and really decide, I'm going to choose to buy this and keep paying more. And you don't need as much of a hand-holding sales cycle because it's so straightforward how your customer gets into that tool. Startups often don't have that benefit, right? They don't have the benefit of people knowing who they are, what the product is. They may be less likely to try it. And that's where acquisition and attraction becomes so important, because you're doing so much education on what you can do and why. I already talked about activation a bit, but the free trials, gamified onboarding, checklist, just reasons to go on the app every day. That's what's activating Duolingo's customers. And then acceptance, you sign up for some elements of the paid Duolingo, you start giving them money, things like that. Any questions before I really start digging into acquisition? Does this ring true to anyone else's experience, with customers they've tried working with, or experiences they've had at other companies? Thanks, Beth. I know I have my friend Jake on the call, who I'm going to bother because he's actually a salesperson at a startup, but I'm curious if this reflects your experience as well here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tapping me in. No, I definitely agree, and it's been great to hear, kind of everyone's input. I like how you mentioned the main takeaway that I had was, it's not how you want to sell it, it's what your customers want, and being able to adjust and pivot, I think is very important, especially for early stage companies, because you might have, a really great roadmap in your head, but that's not always what your clients are going to want. So just being able to actually listen to them, I think is very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jake. Cool. Well, now that I've really shown you the full thing, I'm going to show you the much smaller thing. So we're going to talk about acquisition or sales and what makes for a good sales process. And then we're going to drill deeper into that call that I mentioned as a key part of this training. So other things to just, kind of get into your head when it comes to what makes a good sales process. I mentioned it a bit, but the fact that not everyone is a good fit for your offer. The best way to save time in sales, and I know engineers really like to save time, is to get bad customers out early. The sooner you figure out someone's not a good fit for you so you can focus on other customers, the better off you're going to be in your sales process. We'll talk about this as part of what I call determination or qualification, but you want your ICP that's really specific so that you can be spending that time on the customers who do really want to buy with you. And getting those bad customers out quick and early. And so as people move through any sort of acquisition with you, you're getting fewer and fewer people because you're spending more and more time on them. You're generating a customized demo, you're writing a proposal, you're giving them a sandbox environment to play in. You don't want to give that to every one of your potential customers. You want to give that to the people who are most likely to buy. There's this term in sales that we call, commercial qualification. You might hear it also referred to by the term BANT, of budget, authority, need, timeline. These are all the things I've been kind of mentioning at a high level of, does this customer potentially have money to purchase my service? Does this customer have a timeline to purchase something like me? Do they have a real need? And by need, I mean a pain that you can really solve with your product. And am I talking to the right person? Now, all four of those things may sound like massive challenges when you're first starting to talk with customers, right? I only have a few case studies. How do I get someone to even, consider paying for this? I only have a few case studies. How do I get an executive's attention? You're probably going to spend a decent amount of time doing, that questioning and finding of the right person to talk to, which is going to feel maybe a little wasteful before you get to that really target person. But by asking the right questions, you're going to start getting closer to who that right person is. And then your messaging can start really affecting that director level or that person's need that you've been hearing at the higher level now that you've kind of gotten up to them in a bottoms up approach through whatever, individual person was really bought into the vision of your product, let's say. Yeah. Let's see. I think I've covered, everything I wanted to cover with acquisition here. I think the other thing I would say, I know for me as an engineer that I want to give every customer who talks to me the best possible experience. I want them to get a full proposal right after we speak. I want them to, walk away with every possible thing I could do to convince them. But that might not be worth it if it's not the right time for that person. That might be something I have to do later on. And the beauty of, growing as a startup will be that more and more people will be attracted to you and more interested in your offering, and knowing from your early conversations what made that difference between someone willing to buy and someone not can really start, getting out a lot of noise in that process for you. Great. So the next thing I wanted to touch on were those 4 Ds that I've been mentioning a lot. So discovery, this is when you are discovering information about your potential customer. You're asking good questions. You're learning about them and their pain and what they actually might need in a solution like yours. Determine. You're determining if they're a good customer for me, for you, and if you are a good solution for them, that qualification aspect. Then we have demonstrate. Now, this is where I think a lot of us like to start our sales calls. We want to start with a demo of the product. We want to start with the pitch deck. We want to tell them all of the services that we could do for them. And then define often comes, after some of these initial conversations of what will the work look like. It could be that proposal, or it could be, just some sort of document that puts together what the relationship you will have with that customer, depending on the complexity of your offering. And so as I've worked at different organizations, at different startups, it's been very rigid, right? It's been one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And what I've really, uncovered, I guess, in my time is that you'll need to actually use all of them. You might be defining a little bit about your services or demonstrating your product to get that customer to open up. You might be learning more and more, doing more discovery as your conversations continue. So I hesitate to put anything super rigid, especially in front of people who might love a good process like myself, that locks you into, we have to ask all these questions up front, otherwise we can't, do anything, or we can't, demonstrate the product a little bit early, in order to learn a little bit more about this customer. So really being able to pull all of those different elements together is part of what makes a sales call challenging, but it's also what allows you to be the most flexible for your different customers and the process that they want to undertake with you. All right. So now that I've covered that, I wanted to move to just one last thing I wanted to say about, sales myths. And, I've, certainly done this myself. I'm sure other people with startup experience might have as well, where you're doing informational interviews, networking, customer discovery, and you're pivoting that into a sales call once you start seeing that you've really uncovered a problem you could solve with your potential product. I think one of the things that, when that moment is happening, you want to be very clear that you have a service that can solve the problem that you're hearing. You want to lay the expectation that that conversation is shifting. It sounds like my offer can help solve this for you. Can I walk you through it now or at another time? I think a lot of engineers I've worked with or speak with, are a little sales allergic. They don't want to seem too pushy. They don't want to do a hard sell. And being transparent about what services you can provide, what value you can provide, and when that's happening in the conversation, that is what's going to lend itself to a transparency and trust that you can build with that client. When you're reaching out, today to do customer discovery, people on LinkedIn, people in your network, the favor is probably them giving you information, right? The favor is probably not being sold to yet. But if you make it upfront that you do think after hearing this problem, you have something that can solve it, and you'd like to make that, happen in a real sales call or a real conversation with the right people, that can just start lending itself to the credibility that you can solve this problem and want to do it the right way. Just no one likes to find out they've accidentally ended up in a sales conversation, I guess is what I'd end with. All right. So I want to talk a little bit more about, the anatomy of a good sales call. So I've mentioned, at the top a little bit about this could be multiple calls. So I'm going to start with maybe your first conversation with a customer. So there's a bit of pre-call homework, things that you might want to know about that prospective customer. Typically, I'd say what you want to cover is anything that is obvious, right? You don't want the customer to have to explain, something basic from their website. You don't want to ask, what do you do? Like, what is your job title again? How long have you been working there? All this stuff that you could find online, you should, just to have a little basic information. You don't need to go deep unless this is some dream enterprise client of yours that you're really targeting. But just having a little bit of background, a little bit of homework, a couple of notes is going to just give you, a little bit more firm footing. You'll also potentially see a LinkedIn post about a problem, or you'll see a company, business goal that you can tie into. All of this stuff should start percolating in your brain of, this company has this value, and I know I also care about that. I'm gonna, think about that as I'm doing my discovery or doing my demonstration, because I know they care about, data privacy, and I know we're SOC 2 compliant, or I know we're working on that. Things like that that really start speaking to that actual client, and that begins with doing homework before the call. Yeah, and then the next piece, now that you're actually in the call, I didn't actually put introductions here, and I think there can be a little bit of back and forth around how much time do you spend on intros, how much time do you spend on like building rapport with clients. There can be a bad rap to asking how someone's doing or asking about the weather. Does that come off as salesy? And, for you, if you love hearing about the weather for other people, definitely ask. I like to ask location-based questions myself to, build a bit of a relationship. But I think the best thing you can start off a call with is, setting out a little bit of a recap of, how they found you, what they've given to you already, those pieces of information, and confirm that. And then start setting your expectations about how you're going to use that initial spark of interest from them into the rest of your conversation. Often, when it comes to running a sales call, you'll want to have specific goals of, I want to learn more about this customer just to initially qualify them, or I want to learn more about this customer to really understand their buying process now that we've had a couple of calls. Having those goals in your head, and then even more so being transparent about them to that client is going to really set you far into what you're trying to accomplish with them. Yep. And then, so I kind of covered the, recapping what you do know about the customer. We're going to go into a bunch of different types of discovery questions that I've used, or, some other ones that some other sales experts have mentioned to me, and kind of talk about that. But I think the first thing you want to know when you first get on the call with a client is, what is their motivation for speaking with you today? That kind of goes back to, the networking informational interviews piece. But, if they're meeting with you because they're doing you a favor, it's hard to really know if they're actually there with the intent of like using your solution. So understanding that motivation to get into that call with you can be helpful to really base the rest of your conversation on. When you're thinking about, though, that education piece I've mentioned a couple of times for startups, where you're actually doing a little bit of education about the problem, it can also be helpful up front in the beginning of discovery, setting expectations to, share who gets the best results from you. To share, not a full presentation or case study, but say, I know you're in oil and gas. We do have this use case we did with an oil and gas company. It worked really well for them because X, Y, and Z. How does that sound for you? Like, do you have a similar problem? There's that rule on the internet that if you want to find something out, you say the wrong thing and then you'll get corrected. And I love that, using that with customers. I'm very happy to appear like I don't know anything in front of a customer, because that means they're going to tell me everything. It doesn't mean I'm playing dumb, but it does mean that, I'm going to say, is this how this, pallet jack, this pallet gets moved from this position to another position? Is this how your robot communicates with other robots? Is this what programming language it's written in? Like, I'm going to start making assumptions. Some people in sales might call this a point of view, and then have the customer disagree with me, because they might be more open to that than a strict interview style for discovery. All right. I'm going to take a quick water break. Is there any questions that you guys might have for me? Because I know I've been kind of going for a while, so I want to take a breath for air and water here and let you guys chime in.
I suppose I do have, just a little bit more clarification as far as to, you said make assumptions and then be corrected. Essentially, how does that help you to, I guess, discover their issues? And how does that aid in the call?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I'm on a call with a customer, so like basically, like if you ever played a rogue-like video game, you know, you start out and you die pretty quickly, but you figured out the point you died at, and now you know to avoid that. So you're going to use what a previous customer has told you and say, I've heard from other customers XYZ problem. Does that sound like something you have a problem with? You're using and even if you haven't had a previous call with a customer, maybe it's, I saw, you know, I read an article that this is happening in your industry. I saw this on LinkedIn. Just pulling something about like why you formed this opinion and then letting them correct it. I'll get into that a little bit more too with like some of the questions I like to ask, but giving someone an example of a problem they might have, even if it's something like, I know that doing data analysis can be really inefficient from my time as a data scientist. Is that a problem you've experienced with your projects? That can really start opening up doors for that particular customer you're speaking with.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Cool. I'm going to move into determine then. So in that first call, you're really trying to knock out some of the basic things that I talked about with commercial qualification. Is this the right person? If they're not, can they get me to the right person? What is the amount of money they could spend on this type of solution? Especially in a startup, you might be setting early stage pricing. You don't know what anyone's going to pay you. You're just trying to figure out how much it costs you to even build the thing or do the thing, right? But getting a sense of, is it a monthly subscription they'd want? Is it something they'd want to buy outright? Are you selling, you know, the output of that robot versus the robot itself? Getting just a lay of the land around what they could spend on a solution like this can often start opening up the door for your eventual pricing model as well. You know, I said sales calls or informational interviews and customer discovery shouldn't become a sales call without the customer knowing, but you can turn sales calls into, you know, incognito customer discovery calls, because every sales call is an opportunity for just you to speak with someone who might buy from you and learn from them and get better and better and better. I'll go into some of that in like a later slide. So I wanted to pause and talk about the demonstrating part of a first a sales call. I'm of the opinion that you should do the least amount of information in order to get someone to buy from you. Obviously, you might have to prove you have a product, right? If you're an early stage startup, you might have to have something just to show them this is what the world looks like. But when you do start bringing up that program in the first conversation, or if you start bringing up that pitch deck in a first conversation, you want to be very high level. You don't want to go into all of the design decisions you made. You don't want to go into all of the theory that led to you making certain decisions. I know even for doing something like this, I want you guys to know the 6 years that led to me writing this PowerPoint, right? And, you know, I can't do that even in, you know, a conversation all about that. So scaling back a little bit what you're demonstrating in that first call and making it really targeted to the problem you heard in the initial questions you asked. So if you do get more time to show them, you know, a little bit about your product, and they mentioned, you know, they have issues with moving their robots around, they have issues with running this analysis, and you know your solution can do that, you want to bring it up a little bit just to say, I know we can do that. Here's me doing it a little bit. I want to explore this in a future conversation with you more. Don't be afraid to let a demo be a later part of the conversation, like further down, to encourage people to keep speaking with you. It's certainly a dance that, you know, takes time to perfect and, you know, I can advise on, but just know that people are more tied to their problems at your first call than they're tied to your solution. And you could start losing someone on the solution faster than you can lose them on talking about what annoys them every day. Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, I'm going to cover define and next steps real quick because I'm realizing I'm at, you know, 10 minutes to the hour, and I have a couple more discovery questions I wanted to share with you guys. Yeah, so define, I think this is really important because, this is the work I've done the most of writing how a customer is going to use a solution. If you have something as simple as Duolingo or even something like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of another example, but there are some solutions out there, software solutions that are one size fit all. When you buy a toaster, you're not getting a different toaster, configured in a different way. Robotics isn't really like that, and really, some software like HubSpot isn't like that either, where there might be a lot you need to determine to actually say this is the specifics of what this solution will offer to you. So this is definitely a later conversation piece, but don't be afraid to start saying, I'd like to do this work with you now that you're more and more bought in. And these are the next steps, also like a map or a mutual action plan of how we're going to figure out how the solution works for you. Again, in a startup, you're a little bit unsure how everything's going to fit together. This is maybe one of the first 5 times you've ever done this. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit more time before they buy, building credibility that you care about how that solution will look, and before they even start paying you. You only want to do this for the right customer, the ones that are motivated to buy because it's more work. But once someone has really bought into what you're offering, it can add a lot of credibility in a solution that looks a little bit uncertain, might have a few bugs, because they can see you are caring about their interaction with that product on a deeper level. All right.
Hi, Victoria.
Yeah.
Piggyback on what you were just saying, what would you be your approach to, like, all right, I have an MVP, just a prototype, but I definitely want to get users or client feedback to make sure if that's something they'll buy, right?
Yeah.
What would be the right approach for that?
Mm-hmm. To make sure it's something they want to buy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have a question that in discovery that I'll go through that I think does cover that.
Okay.
I think too, but I want to answer your question with another thought I've had, which is, would you pay $1 for it? Literally, like, would you give me $1 right now to solve this problem? And I think it negates the total eventual cost being a problem.
Okay.
But yeah, I like that as it's the cheapest possible thing I could give you. What do you think about that? Or, maybe even a slightly higher $5, but just getting them thinking about the idea you will eventually charge them, even if you have a set free trial, is important.
Okay.
Cool. Now I'm going to just run through some good discovery questions, and I'll include this also after for you guys, just, good discovery questions, why I like them. I do think less is more. And as I go through some of these examples, I'm also going to point out that what I decide are good discovery questions for me and my business might be different than what are good discoveries for you and your business. Some of these I'm putting under general because I think they apply to most people, but you'll see in a couple slides a very specific question I like to ask that's unique to me and the work I do, let's say. So I think one of the first questions I really think is important for innovation in startups is, how do you solve it today? How have you tried to solve it in the past? What problems occurred then? Even though what you're doing is super new, there was a way someone did it before. Before Duolingo, there was Rosetta Stone. Before Duolingo, there were classes, right? There was some way someone was solving this problem. Before there was a robot, there was a faster pallet truck. Before there was HubSpot, we were using Excel. There was something someone did before, and did they like it? How do they feel about it? That can really just indicate to you, was this problem even worth them trying to find a solution for, or if they're just really happy with what they're currently working in. And then another question I like, what's a must-have for you in this solution? What does the success look and feel like? It can be helpful, even if this is someone who's not going to buy, to know why. Like, what feature do you not have today that's preventing your MVP from penetrating the market? Getting free product feedback from an executive can be almost as valuable at this stage for a company, because you know what you should be really moving towards. Would we need to involve others to make this purchase? This is definitely a real startup problem of I'm never talking to the right person. I don't think you want to ask accusatorily, you know, are you the decision maker? Do you sign off on budget? There's a lot of aggressive tactics for this. And instead, I personally like to bring up my experience inside a large company at General Electric and some of the problems I encountered then for reasons I want to know who the legal person is. I want to know who the finance person is. So all of that can be kind of addressed in this type of question once you get to that point in that conversation. And then why now? When would you want this problem solved by? Where do you want to be in a year? I know in some of the work I do consulting wise, I might be a little early for someone. They're not quite ready. I might have to do some handling, objection handling for that. But getting someone very clear on what makes them unhappy right now or when they'll be very unhappy, that discomfort, that timing is going to tell you a lot, you know, after your conversation, your first conversation with them. And then, you know, the last good discovery question I really like, what is the biggest problem your organization is trying to solve right now? There is some CEO at that company, there is some boss who has made that individual contributor employee do something to make things better at their company. And I want to know what that is, either because I want to connect the product I'm offering to the biggest problem at their company because it does make sense, or because I want to know what project is going to threaten and drive attention away from, you know, the work that I'm trying to do with this client in whatever field I'm in right now. Yeah. So I want to be really conscious of people's time actually and pause here because I can fill the last 4 minutes, but if there are additional questions, you know, I'm happy to stop here and address them. All right, I will take that silence as a no and keep going. All right. So I wanted to talk about a couple other questions, but I think I'm just gonna say these are questions you might see if you look from other sales guidance, and I want to say why I don't think they'll maybe work for a company that's just getting started. Why, you know, X, why this, why me, why do you want to buy from me? If you went to your customer, if you're getting their attention, if you're educating them, it doesn't really make sense for you to ask them why, because you might be still doing a lot of convincing in the sales cycle. What is it costing you to stay where you are? You might have to really build that business case out for your customer, and they may not know yet what it's costing them money-wise. You could maybe get to it figuratively, but it's not always easy to get a customer to say, you know, we crunched the numbers and it actually costs us $5,000 a month in employee turnover, you know, doing this right now. And then same thing kind of on the metrics side. If they've never bought something like this before, they may not know. And so I think as much as important as it is for you to read different things about good discovery questions or have me advise you, know that not all questions are made equal or made for every sales conversation. And then I just wanted to throw out some very specific questions I've used in sales calls that are very specific to the product or service. Our solutions on AWS, does that meet your cloud platform requirements? What type of pallets do you use? What is the material flow in your warehouse? These are all questions I've used from a technical qualification perspective that are not valuable for you, but as you're building your sales process, you're going to find these questions. And then what is your opinion on Elon Musk? It's something I do like to ask some of my clients just to get a sense of how they think about tech and startups and just have a conversation around technology and its impact on society right now. All right. And then also real quickly at the end here, you know, do you have a budget for this? I don't really like that question. I think it's a little presumptuous. No one has a budget for anything new and cool. You often are making budgets. No one has known your service is out there. You're going to have to start justifying finding that money. And if they like it, they can find money. People have money in places. They just haven't decided to spend it on you because they don't quite like the solution. If I could wave a magic wand, also not a big fan of this question. I think it's a little silly, but you might see that online too for, you know, how could I solve this problem? What would you like it to look like? I just think it's too ambiguous. You don't have a magic wand either. And then I kind of referred to this also, but are you the decision maker? Also kind of a loose question for me, and a little like, you're not important enough for me to talk to, who is? So yeah. Well, that was my presentation. I really appreciate everyone's time, joining me on the call. I still have a few more minutes if other people have a few more questions, but I really hope you guys learned something from this. If you do have a takeaway you'd like to share or throw in the chat, I'd love to hear it. This is the first time I've given this training myself, and I'm always happy to make it better for the people I work with.
Thank you, Victoria. One last question that I have is, so if you're going to reach out to our clients, let's say big organization, right? And you're just a startup and you're trying to propose your service, going with outbound emails and cold calls, what would be the right approach questions to ask, so you can hope to get a feedback or a reply from those big organizations because they're so hard to convince? What would be like your approach in general? That's without the discovery question. What would be the right approach to go about, convincing those big organizations?
Yeah. So I think, and this is definitely the attraction area that gets a lot of startups very interested in. So I've thought a lot about it, and you're going to get really far in person and networking interactions because someone can see you and they can trust you. You're looking at me, you can trust me, you know what I'm here and doing for you.
Right.
And cold email and phone calls can work. And I have seen them work. I think you just need to be able to give someone in that email a reason to trust you, whether that's even something like a video, even if that's it's
Okay.
most likely even a result. Like, I've done this for someone else, or in our experiment, we found why. There are also just a lot of other ways you can get on people's radar through an email besides just pitching them a call.
Yeah.
But starting straight with pitching someone a call or to meet with you can be challenging. And there's a lot of other ways you can show up in industries and get their attention. So.
No, thanks. That's very insightful. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other questions you guys might have?
Sorry, I'm not sure if Jenny had anything there, but so to piggyback off of what we just said, as far as attraction goes, you said that cold email and cold calling doesn't necessarily always get the potential client to trust you right off the bat. Sometimes you need where another sense of trust, another sort of negative trust, which can come from a demo or a video or something like that, a result. And when you're trying to, I suppose, acquire or attract a customer, like, what do you suggest to use social media as an outlet to showcase this, to cold email using some sort of result, like email with a result first, or like how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of sort of a multi-pronged approach, because when you're one startup, in a big sea of options, you have to be really loud, and you also have to show up and contribute to that industry, to that community you want to sell to, before you start really saying you're the best in it or you have all the answers. So I often ask, like, what can you offer your potential customer for free? And how might that lead to warmer conversations with people you want to work with? There's lots of ways to do that. And, talking more about marketing is something I've considered for kind of my next conversation, because it is a very big sea of options. And, you just don't want to spend hours and hours writing a newsletter no one reads, right? Or hours and hours sending 6,000 emails no one reads. So having the right approach can really make the difference for something like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm?
Victoria, I just wanted to say thank you. This was a really great conversation, and I learned a lot. So really appreciate you putting this together.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. See ya. All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone's time. You'll probably get a little survey thing from Luma tomorrow for this conversation, but definitely appreciate the feedback and questions, and wish you guys all the best of luck in sales at your startups.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Victoria.
Yeah.
Thanks, Victoria. Bye.
Bye.